Hey everyone, we're working hard to get our first 1,000 subscribers, sign up and you won't regret it. I used to think there were only two kinds of betrayal. The kind that comes from a stranger, and the kind that comes from someone you loved. I was wrong. There's a third kind, the kind that comes from the people who raised you, when they look you in the face and decide you're the villain in your own life. It started with a pregnancy test on our bathroom counter and a smile that didn't reach my wife's eyes. Her name was Vanessa. Mine is Caleb. We lived in a tidy rental outside Raleigh, the kind of neighborhood with mulch beds and judgmental HOA emails. We'd been married almost 4 years, not trying for a baby. Whenever the topic came up, Vanessa would say she wanted to wait until things felt stable. That morning, she said the line, then handed me the test like it was a gift receipt. Positive. I remember the sound my brain made, like a door unlocking. I picked her up, spun her once, laughed too loud, kissed her forehead. I was already imagining my dad's face when I told him. My mom's hands fluttering in excitement. My parents had been obsessed with the idea of a grandkid for years. I was their only son. The thing I didn't notice in the moment was that Vanessa looked relieved. Not happy. Relieved. Looking back, I hate myself for missing it. But when you want something badly enough, your brain edits reality for you. For a couple weeks, we lived inside the fantasy. Vanessa started buying baby stuff online, but not in the normal way. Not like, look at this cute onesie. More like, I got a deal on a full crib set, shipped from a reseller, no returns. She joined parenting groups, but wouldn't let me see them. She began taking her phone into the bathroom, face down on counters, password changes, that kind of behavior I used to roll my eyes at when my friends complained about it. Then came my parents. We told them at Sunday dinner, well, she told them. Vanessa had timed it so the moment belonged to her. We were barely seated when she slid an ultrasound printout across the table like a playing card. My mom cried instantly. My dad stood up and hugged Vanessa first. He hugged me after, but it was the quick, distracted kind of hug, like I was just the person holding the door open for the real guest. I didn't care. I was glowing. I was finally giving them what they wanted. Vanessa leaned into it like she'd rehearsed it. She let my mom touch her stomach even though it was too early to feel anything. She let my dad take pictures and text them to relatives. She took compliments like oxygen. And my parents, God, my parents ate it up. That's the part you need to understand. Vanessa didn't just cheat on me. She cheated into my family. She knew how to become the favorite. By the time she was visibly pregnant, my mom was calling her every day. My dad started referring to the baby as my grandbaby in this possessive, glowing way that made me feel weirdly replaceable. Meanwhile, Vanessa and I were rotting. She stopped wanting me to come to appointments. She said it made her anxious. She stopped wanting intimacy. She said pregnancy made her uncomfortable. She stopped wanting anything from me except my paycheck and my silence. And when I confronted her about the phone, about the distance, about how she acted like I was a roommate she didn't like, she didn't deny anything. She just looked at me with this cold, measured expression and said she couldn't handle my paranoia while she was carrying my child. Those words were a leash. Because once a baby is involved, you start policing your own emotions. You start worrying that your stress will harm them. You start swallowing questions. So I swallowed. Until I couldn't. It happened on a random Tuesday night, the kind where life feels boring and safe. Vanessa fell asleep on the couch with her phone on her chest. A notification lit up the screen. A man's name I didn't recognize. Not a coworker. Not a friend. Just a name, followed by a message that wasn't subtle. Something about missing her, and, next time, being worth the risk. My heart didn't pound. It dropped. Like my body knew before my mind did. I took the phone. My hands weren't shaking, yet. I typed in her old passcode. It didn't work. I tried the passcode I'd watched her enter a dozen times from across the room. It didn't work. I stared at her sleeping face and felt a new kind of fear. The fear of realizing your entire life has been happening without you. I didn't wake her up. Not then. Instead I did the one thing I'd never done in our marriage. I checked the tablet in the kitchen, the shared one we used for streaming and grocery lists. Vanessa had logged into an email account on it months ago to order something and never signed out. There were messages. Not dozens. Not a messy trail. A clean, controlled thread. Which was worse. She was careful. But she wasn't perfect. The sender was a man named Jordan. And the subject lines were normal enough that you could pretend they were coworkers, until you opened them. The content wasn't graphic. It didn't have to be. It was intimate in the way only long-term secrets become. Plans. Locations. Little confirmations. I sat at the kitchen table with the tablet glowing in front of me and felt my marriage turn into an autopsy. Then I found the message that stopped my breathing. A few lines about her being late, him asking if she was sure, her replying that she handled it, and then, weeks later, her sending an ultrasound picture. The same one she'd slid across my parents' table. And Jordan's response wasn't congratulations. It was, I can't believe it's real. I read that sentence again and again until the meaning finally punched through. I wasn't just being cheated on. I was being used. My first thought wasn't anger. It was denial. I told myself there were explanations. Timing issues. Misunderstandings. Maybe she'd send it to him to mess with him. Maybe. But then I checked the dates. And I did the math. And the timeline didn't bend. It snapped. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my car outside a 24-hour pharmacy and stared at the steering wheel until the sun came up. By morning, I had two thoughts that wouldn't leave me alone. I needed proof that couldn't be argued away. If I said anything too soon, Vanessa would rewrite the story first. And if Vanessa told my parents before I did, I already knew whose side they'd take. Because they'd been practicing for months. By noon, I was in a clinic parking lot, holding a pamphlet about paternity testing, reading the words like they were written in a foreign language. My phone buzzed. A text from my mom. She asked how her girl was feeling today, and if I was being supportive. That's when I realized, even before I spoke, I was already guilty in their eyes. I started the car. And I drove home to confront my wife, knowing that if I did it wrong, if I let Vanessa cry first, or speak first, I would lose more than my marriage. I would lose my family. And I still walked through that door anyway. Because I needed to know the truth. Even if the truth left me alone. That evening, Vanessa came home smelling like a man's cologne, and when I asked where she'd been, she didn't even flinch. She just smiled and said something that made my stomach turn. She told me my parents were already worried about me. Vanessa didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. That's what scared me the most. I waited until after dinner, until the kitchen was clean and the house had that quiet hum of normal life. I sat across from her on the couch, careful with my tone, like I was trying not to startle a wild animal. I told her I'd seen the emails. Her eyes flicked to the side for half a second. Not to me. Not to the TV. To her phone on the coffee table. A calculation. Then she leaned back and folded her arms, cradling her stomach without thinking, like the baby was a shield. She said she didn't know what I was talking about. So I described the message thread. The dates. The ultrasound email. The man's name. That's when she finally looked straight at me. And she did the thing that only people who are good at lying can do. She turned the conversation into a trial where I was already the defendant. She said I'd been spiraling lately. She said my mood swings were scaring her. She said she changed her password because she didn't feel safe with how suspicious I'd become. Then she hit the line she knew would bruise the deepest. She asked if I wanted to be the kind of man who traumatized his unborn child with stress and conflict. I felt my jaw tighten so hard my teeth hurt. I told her I wasn't leaving this conversation without a straight answer. So she gave me one, but not the kind I wanted. She said Jordan was an old friend from before we met. She said he'd reached out when he heard she was pregnant and she didn't know how to shut him down. She said she sent the ultrasound to prove she was married now, stable, moved on. She said the late message was about her period being late years ago and the email thread just looked weird because she deleted parts of it. She said it so smoothly I almost believed her. Almost. Then I asked one question. I asked why his response to the ultrasound was I can't believe it's real. And for the first time all night, Vanessa hesitated. Just a fraction. But enough. Enough for me to see the crack in the glass. Her mouth tightened, and the sweetness drained out of her face. She said I was twisting words, and then she stood up and walked to the kitchen like she needed space. I followed her. Not aggressively, just present. I told her I was scheduling a paternity test. The moment I said it, the air changed. Vanessa turned around slowly, like she was deciding which mask to wear. Then she laughed. A soft laugh, like I'd said something adorable. She told me I was being cruel. She told me I was humiliating her. She told me if I went through with it, she'd never forgive me. And then she said something that explained everything. She said my parents wouldn't forgive me either. Because she'd already talked to them. That's when my blood went cold. I asked what she told them. Vanessa shrugged like it was nothing. Like she hadn't just detonated a bomb. She said she told them I was questioning the baby. She said she told them I was acting unstable. She said she told them she was scared I'd abandon her, and she needed them in case she had to protect herself. I stood there, staring at her, trying to process how fast she'd moved. Vanessa didn't just cheat. She built an escape route. A safety net. Made out of my parents. I grabbed my keys and walked out without another word, because if I stayed, I was going to say something unforgivable. My phone rang before I hit the end of the driveway. My dad. I answered, and he didn't even say hello. He told me my mother was crying. He told me Vanessa was pregnant and vulnerable. He told me he didn't raise a son who bullies women. I tried to speak. I tried to explain. I tried to say there were emails and lies and a man named Jordan Ann. But he cut me off. He said I was overreacting. He said pregnancy messes with hormones. He said I needed to stop consuming garbage online that made me distrust my wife. Then my mom got on the phone. Her voice was shaking with anger. She told me the baby was a blessing and I was poisoning it with my ego. She told me I was being evil. That was her word. Evil. For wanting to know if the child my wife was carrying was actually mine. I hung up. Not because I didn't love them. Because I suddenly realized love didn't protect me here. Love was the weapon they were using against me. That night I stayed at a cheap hotel off the highway. I stared at the ceiling and felt something shift inside me, something hardening. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not for revenge. For survival. The lawyer told me the truth no one wants to hear. In my state, if I was married and my wife gave birth, I could be presumed the legal father unless I acted quickly. He told me timelines mattered. He told me the court didn't care about my feelings. He told me to document everything. So I did. I printed the emails from the tablet. I took screenshots. I saved them in 3 places. I scheduled the paternity test through a reputable lab that could do prenatal testing legally with the right consent, or immediately after birth if needed. Then I served Vanessa with divorce papers. I didn't do it dramatically. I didn't throw her stuff outside. I didn't scream. I just ended it, quietly, the way you shut off a gas line before it explodes. Vanessa's response was instant and theatrical. She showed up at my parents' house the same day, sobbing, holding her belly, telling them I'd abandoned her. And my parents did what they always do when someone performs pain convincingly. They believed the performance. My mom called me and told me I'd made my wife homeless. I reminded her Vanessa had a job. Friends. Options. She had chosen their house because she knew they'd take her in. My mom told me that didn't matter. Because Vanessa was family now. I asked, very calmly, if I was still family. There was a silence on the line that answered the question better than words. Over the next few weeks, my parents stopped answering my calls. They posted vague quotes online about loyalty and forgiveness. They told relatives I was having a breakdown. Vanessa filed for temporary support. My lawyer handled it. I kept my head down and did what I had to do. And then, one afternoon, my lawyer called me with a question that made me sit down hard. He asked if I knew my wife had been married before. I said no. He asked if I knew she'd used a different last name in past records. I said no. Then he told me something that made my stomach drop lower than it had the night I saw the emails. He said Vanessa's friend, Jordan, wasn't just some guy. Jordan had a history. And Vanessa had a pattern. And if we didn't move fast, I wasn't just going to lose my marriage. I was going to be legally attached to a child who might not even exist the way I thought. That evening, I drove past my parents' house and saw Vanessa on their porch, laughing into her phone, while my mother carried a stack of baby gifts inside like a devoted grandmother. The worst part about being painted as the villain is the loneliness. People assume you did something unforgivable. They don't ask for details. They don't want nuance. They want a simple story where the pregnant woman is the hero and the man is the coward. Vanessa fed them that story like it was bread. And my parents ate every crumb. I didn't fight publicly. I didn't post online. I didn't show up to family events with printed emails like a maniac. I did everything through the legal channels, quietly, because the moment you look desperate, people stop listening. My lawyer found records that made my skin crawl. Vanessa had been in a messy legal situation years ago with a different man, nothing criminal, but enough to show a pattern of manipulation, restraining order threats used in arguments, support claims that didn't line up with timelines, a sudden miscarriage that happened right after a boyfriend tried to leave. The details weren't clean enough to be a smoking gun. But the pattern was familiar. Weaponize vulnerability. Control the narrative. Secure the safety net before the fall. Meanwhile, the pregnancy clock kept ticking. I fought to ensure I wouldn't be automatically locked in as the legal father without proof. Vanessa refused prenatal testing. She framed it as abuse. My parents echoed her, calling me heartless. So we prepared for the next best option, immediate paternity testing after birth. The final divorce hearing wasn't scheduled until after the due date. The court system doesn't care about your crisis, it runs on its own timeline. Vanessa stayed in my parents' house. She took maternity photos in their backyard. She posted captions about choosing peace and protecting my baby. My mom commented hearts under every post. My dad liked every photo. I stopped looking. Every time I did, it felt like I was watching my own replacement. Then, in late summer, I got the call. Vanessa was in labor. I didn't hear it from her. I heard it from my father, whose voice was trembling with excitement. He told me I could still do the right thing and come to the hospital. He told me this was my chance to redeem myself. Like I was the one who'd betrayed anyone. I told him I wasn't coming without a paternity test agreement in writing, and I wasn't signing anything at the hospital. My dad's excitement turned into rage. He told me if I didn't show up, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. I said I was already regretting plenty. I hung up. I sat in my apartment, the one I'd moved into after leaving the house, and stared at the blank wall for a long time. I wasn't proud of how numb I felt. But numbness was the only thing keeping me functional. Hours later, my phone buzzed again. A photo from my mom. A newborn, wrapped in a pink blanket, face scrunched, tiny fist raised like it was already fighting the world. My mom captioned it, "Meet your daughter." My stomach did something strange, like it wanted to feel joy and nausea at the same time. I stared at the baby's face. Then I stared harder. I'm not going to pretend I'm some genetics expert. But I know my family. My dad has dark hair and olive skin. I do too. So do my uncles. So do my cousins. We're not pale people. It's obvious even in baby photos. This child was very fair. Light hair fuzz. Pale skin. Features that didn't match Vanessa either. Vanessa is brunette, darker complexion, sharp nose. The baby looked like neither of us. My mind tried to rationalize it. Recessive genes. Random chance. Newborn lighting. But there was a simpler explanation, and it was sitting in my chest like a stone. I called my lawyer. He told me not to say a word to my parents yet. He told me to do the test. So I did. Within 48 hours, my lawyer's investigator had arranged it legally through the hospital protocols, nothing shady, nothing dramatic, just paperwork, court orders, and professionals who do this every day. Vanessa screamed when she realized what was happening. My mom called me sobbing, telling me I was humiliating Vanessa after birth. My dad called me furious, telling me I was tormenting a woman who'd just given me a child. I didn't argue. I just waited. Because the truth doesn't need volume. It needs receipts. The results came back a week later. I opened the email on my laptop, alone, in a silent apartment. I read the first line and felt my whole body go cold, then hot. Not the biological father. It wasn't relief. It wasn't triumph. It was a hollow, stunned kind of grief. Because even when you suspect something, certainty still hurts. I forwarded the results to my lawyer. Then, against his advice, I forwarded them to my parents. No commentary. No insults. Just the proof. Then I waited. My phone didn't ring for hours. When it finally did, it was my mother. Her voice was tight and strange, like she was speaking through clenched teeth. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask how I was. She demanded to know if the test could be wrong. I told her these labs don't, accidentally, declare a man not the father. I told her if she wanted, she could ask the hospital herself. She could verify it with the paperwork. There was silence. Then she said something that made me realize how deep the denial ran. She said that even if the baby wasn't mine biologically, I was still the real father, because Vanessa was my wife when she got pregnant. I almost laughed, but it came out as a sound more like choking. I told her that wasn't how biology works, and it wasn't how law works either, at least not if I acted in time. My mom said I was being cold. I told her I was being alive. Then my dad got on the line. For the first time in months, he sounded uncertain. He asked me who the father was. I told him I didn't know. He asked if Vanessa knew. I told him she knew. She'd known from the start. Because she had used the ultrasound like a bargaining chip. I could practically hear my father's pride collapsing. But even then, he wasn't ready to face what it meant. He said maybe Vanessa made a mistake. He said maybe the timeline was confusing. I told him adults don't mistakenly cheat, get pregnant, and frame their husbands. Then I heard something in the background, Vanessa's voice, sharp and loud. She was talking to someone, not on speaker, but loud enough to carry. My dad said he had to go. The call ended. That night, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. A single sentence. From Jordan. He wrote that Vanessa was out of control, and he didn't want to be dragged into her mess. Then he wrote one more line. He said my parents didn't know the full story. He said Vanessa had told them a lie even bigger than the baby's paternity. And if I thought the paternity test was the end of it, I was wrong. Jordan asked to meet me in person, and he promised he could prove Vanessa had been setting me up for something that would have destroyed me permanently. I didn't want to meet Jordan. Meeting the other man feels like stepping into a stereotype. Like you're consenting to being a character in someone else's drama. But Jordan wasn't texting like a winner or a lover. He was texting like a man trying to avoid getting buried. We met in a diner off the interstate, the kind with burnt coffee and laminated menus. Jordan showed up wearing a baseball cap and the anxious posture of someone who'd never been punched but worries it could happen. He didn't waste time. He told me Vanessa had been seeing him on and off for over a year. He said she'd told him our marriage was basically over. He said she'd framed me as distant, controlling, emotionally unstable. Same narrative. Different audience. He slid his phone across the table and showed me a screenshot, Vanessa's message from months earlier. In it, she wrote that if I tried to leave her, she'd make sure I'd paid, because I owed her for wasting her years. Then came the part that made my skin go numb. Jordan said Vanessa had planned to put my name on the birth certificate no matter what. Not because she thought I'd raise the baby. Because she wanted leverage. If I was legally the father, even temporarily, she could drag me through court for support. She could claim abandonment. She could claim emotional cruelty. She could squeeze money out of me while presenting herself as a victim. And my parents were the perfect witnesses. Because they'd already decided I was evil. Jordan said Vanessa had bragged that my mother would testify against her own son if it meant protecting the baby. I stared at him and realized I wasn't just dealing with cheating. I was dealing with a con. A slow one. Built on emotion. Built on family pressure. Built on the fact that decent people hesitate to fight pregnant women, because it feels morally wrong, even when the pregnant woman is the one lighting the fire. Jordan looked miserable when he said it, but then he added something else. He wasn't the father. His face tightened like he hated admitting it. He said he'd gotten tested privately, he couldn't afford a kid, and he'd panicked, and the results said he wasn't the father either. That explained the baby's features. It explained the mismatch. And it opened a door I hadn't even considered. Vanessa had been juggling more than one man. I walked out of that diner feeling like I'd been living next to a sinkhole and never noticed the ground shifting. My lawyer moved fast after that. He filed the paternity results with the court and petitioned to make sure my name wouldn't be attached to the child in any legal way. Vanessa fought it, but the evidence was too clean. The judge wasn't interested in her tears once the lab results were on paper. Vanessa lost the support claim. She lost the narrative in court. And suddenly, the people who'd been so loud about my evil became very quiet. My parents didn't call for weeks. Then, one afternoon, my mom showed up at my apartment. Not angry. Not righteous. Small. She held her purse with both hands like she needed it to stand up. She asked if we could talk. I let her in. She didn't apologize right away. She tried to explain. She said Vanessa had seemed so scared. She said the baby had felt like a miracle. She said she couldn't imagine the baby not being ours, because she had already loved her. I listened. Then I asked one question. I asked why, when I begged them to hear me, they called me evil. My mom's eyes filled. She said she thought she was protecting a child. I told her she'd protected a lie. And she'd done it by sacrificing her son. That's the moment her face finally cracked in a way that felt real. She whispered that Vanessa had moved out suddenly. She said Vanessa had left the baby with her for a few hours and then never came back that night. She said they were scrambling, trying to reach her. Then she said the sentence that made everything click into place with brutal clarity. She said, "We're raising her right now." My chest tightened. Because here it was. The thing my parents cared about most. Not truth. Not me. A baby. A baby they'd already claimed. My mom told me they'd been in contact with social services. She told me they were trying to do the right thing. She told me they needed family unity. Then she said what she really came for. She said they wanted to meet their first grandchild. Not Vanessa's baby. Mine. The one they now believed I'd have someday, with someone else, because Vanessa's baby wasn't, technically, theirs anymore. It was almost funny. They'd finally accepted biology when it suited them. I told my mom there was no grandchild. She looked confused. So I told her the truth I'd kept quiet for months. I told her I wasn't childless. I told her that while the divorce was unfolding, I'd reconnected with someone I used to know, Mara, a woman I dated briefly in college before life split us apart. We'd run into each other by accident at a coffee shop. It started as conversation, then support, then something steady. And yes, Mara had a baby. A little boy. But he wasn't mine biologically either. He was hers, from a previous relationship. And I had chosen to be in their lives anyway. Not because I needed to prove anything. Because I wanted a family built on honesty. My mom stared at me like she couldn't compute it. She asked if I was trying to punish them by keeping him away. I told her the truth. I told her I didn't trust them. I told her they'd already shown me how quickly they'd turn on me for the fantasy of a grandchild. And until I saw real accountability, real apology, real change, I wasn't letting them into a child's life just so they could feel redeemed. My mom cried. She said they made a mistake. I told her mistakes are forgetting milk at the store. This was a choice. My dad called later that night. His voice was rough. He told me he wanted to fix it. I asked him if Vanessa had admitted anything. He hesitated. Then he said she'd left a note. In it, she wrote that she was tired and that the baby deserved better people. No apology. No truth. Just another performance, this time designed to make herself the tragic character instead of the villain. And my parents still wanted to believe it. I told my dad I wasn't interested in repairing anything until he could say, out loud, what he'd done. He went quiet. Then, finally, he said it. He said he'd chosen Vanessa over me because it was easier than admitting his son could be right and a pregnant woman could be wrong. He said he'd been ashamed of how it looked. He said he'd been afraid of being judged. And he said he was sorry. Not perfectly. Not poetically. But it was the first time I'd heard him sound like my father instead of a prosecutor. I didn't forgive him on the spot. I didn't hand him instant redemption. I told him reconciliation would be slow, and it would be on my terms. I told him I'd consider meeting in a neutral place, without Mara or the baby, because my new family didn't deserve to be dragged into old wounds. Then I told him one more thing, the part that felt like justice. I told him that Vanessa's attempt to trap me legally had failed because I moved early and stayed calm. Because I listened to professionals. Because I didn't let emotions make me sloppy. I told him she'd wanted money and a villain story. Instead, she got court records and consequences. And the grandchild my parents had obsessed over? She wasn't mine. She wasn't Jordan's. And the last I heard, the state was trying to locate the actual father while my parents faced the reality that wanting a baby doesn't make you entitled to one. I hung up and sat in the quiet. Mara's son was asleep in the next room when I got home later that night. I stood in the doorway and watched his chest rise and fall. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something other than betrayal. I felt peace. Not because I'd won. Because I'd finally stopped letting other people decide who I was. And the funny part? The moment my parents stopped seeing me as evil wasn't when they learned I was innocent. It was when they realized there might still be a baby they could claim. That truth hurt. But it also set me free. Because now I knew exactly what I was dealing with. And I knew exactly what I would protect. My life. My sanity. And the family I chose, built on truth, not pressure. A week later, my mom texted asking for a picture of Mara's son, just to see him. I didn't reply. I sent one sentence instead, earn it first.